Hello, YouTube, and thank you for joining me, Morgan Freeman, for the final chapter of Tales Back in Diapers. Chapter 10, The Revelation. Tails let out a sigh as he walked up to his house. Ebony was safe at home, and Sonic was in the hospital, much to his protests. A broken nose, 3 fractured ribs, a nearly broken arm, a broken ankle, and multiple scrapes and bruises, and he still didn't want to go. Tails was just happy that it was over for now, anyway. Stepping inside his house, he was immediately greeted by his mother. Rosemary hugged Tails before he could say anything. "I'm so glad you're back, Miles. And it looks like you didn't get a scratch. Sonic sure kept his word." Well, I can't say the same for Sonic. He got pretty beat up, and he's in the hospital right now, Tails said, returning the hug. "Oh my, is he really hurt that badly?" "Yeah, but he should be just fine in no time," Tails smiled. "Well, it's good to hear that everything worked out, and Ebony's back with her family too, right?" Rosemary asked. "Yeah, her mom came and picked us up, so everything should be back to normal now. As normal as things can get for my little baby boy," Rosemary said, tickling Tails. Tails giggled, wetting himself in the process. What is this?" Rosemary asked, pointing out a few spots on Tails' clothes. "What's what, Mommy?" "Oh no, you got blood all over your clothes. It's not your blood, is it?" Rosemary asked, with a concerned look on her face. "It's probably from Sonic. I had to help carry him into the hospital." Tails looked at his clothes. "I guess some of his blood dripped on me." "Here." Rosemary started undressing him. "I'll get these cleaned up. Why don't you run along and go play for a bit?" "Okay, Mommy. I wish I had someone to play with, though." "I'll play with you once your clothes are out of the wash, okay?" Rosemary smiled, putting her hand on his shoulder. "All right, Mommy." Tails smiled and started to waddle off, but turned around and ran back up to his mother. "Before I forget, do you have my passy?" "Yeah, got it right here." Rosemary fished the pacifier out of her pocket and put it around Tails' neck. "Open up, sweetie." Tails opened his mouth, and Rosemary slipped the pacifier in. Tails sucked happily on it before toddling off to his room. "Thank you, Mommy." Rosemary laughed to herself as Tails toddled off. He's just as cute as he was when he was little. Once Tails reached his room, he saw that a whole bunch of his old toys from when he was little piled at the foot of his bed. He grabbed a pilot's hat and set it on top of his head. It was obviously too small now, but he still liked the hat. For the next hour, Tails played with the various toys he had accumulated over the years until his stomach growled. He whimpered and patted his tummy and waddled back upstairs. He looked around and found his mom still in the laundry room, standing next to the washer. He stood next to her and pulled on her dress. "Mommy." What is it, Miles?" she asked, crouching down to his level. "Do you need something, sweetie?" "I'm hungry, Mommy." "Oh, I'm sorry, Miles." Rosemary looked at the clock, reading 6 p.m. "I completely lost track of time. Come on." Tails let out a yawn and took his mother's hand. Sounds like my baby boy is getting tired too. Rosemary smiled, picking him up. There we go. What do you say about going to bed once you're done eating? Sounds good to me, Mommy, Tails said, snuggling into his mother's chest. Okay then, Rosemary smiled, walking into the kitchen. Ebony's mother was kind enough to give me a few things from her house. She gave me a couple bottles and enough formula mix for a few months. A bottle of warm formula sounds good to me. It'll make me nice and sleepy too. Tails yawned. All right, 1 bottle of formula coming right up. She set Tails on the floor. Just wait a minute, okay? Tails smiled and nodded. Once the microwave beeped, Rosemary tested the formula to make sure it wasn't too hot and picked Tails back up. You want me to feed you? Yes, please. Rosemary giggled and pulled the pacifier out of his mouth. All right, open up. Tails was about to open up when he realized something. Wait, what about my crib? Your crib. What about it? Do we still have it somewhere? I'd rather sleep in it than my bed if that's okay. Tails blushed. It's okay, but are you sure you can still fit in it? Rosemary asked. I don't see why not. I haven't grown that much since I was little. I had the crib until I was 4, I think. Well, I think it's still in your closet. She set the bottle back in the microwave and set him on the chair. I'll bring it up here and set it up in my room. Rosemary went back downstairs and into Tails' room. She opened his closet and found a box lying next to the wall with a picture of a crib on it. There it is. She grabbed the box and lugged it back upstairs and into her room. Tails followed her and watched as she pulled the pieces out of the box. Sorry, Miles. It might be a little while until you can have your bottle and go to bed. That's okay, Mommy. I can help you put it together. Tails crawled over to her. Oh, thank you, Miles. With your help, we can put it together in no time. Rosemary smiled. Within 15 minutes, the crib was completely put together, and Rosemary moved it next to the bed. That wasn't so hard. Now for the real test. She picked up Tails and set him inside. Lie down and stretch out. Tails did as she asked, and there was still a good 5-inch gap on both ends. See, I told you. So you did. She picked him back up. I think it's time we get something in that little tummy of yours and send you off to Betty Bye. Tails giggled as Rosemary carried him back into the kitchen. Rosemary reheated the bottle of milk and walked back to the bedroom with Tails in one arm and the bottle in her other hand. She sat down in the rocking chair in the corner of the room. You ready now? Wait just a bit, Tails said, hopping down and toddling out of the room. Now what? Rosemary sighed. Tails toddled back half a minute later, carrying his footy pajamas. Can't forget these. He tossed them on the bed and raised his arms. Rosemary picked him up and cradled him. Now I'm ready. Good. Open up. Tails opened his mouth and Rosemary slid the bottle in. He felt his body relax and his eyes getting heavy as the warm liquid flowed into his stomach. Even with his eyes closed, he continued to drink and held on to the bottle. Rosemary smiled as she nursed him. It may have been different using a bottle, but it's not like she could do it herself anymore. Even so, this still felt the same as it did years ago. She felt like it was the perfect way to bond with her baby boy again. After a few minutes had passed, Tails eventually stopped sucking on the bottle and had fallen asleep. With the bottle empty, Rosemary set it aside and wiped the excess formula from around his mouth. She carefully changed his diaper, dressed him into his pajamas, slipped the pacifier back into his mouth, and tucked him into the crib. She set the bottle on the counter in the kitchen and decided to call it a night too. "Good night, my little boy," she said, kissing him on the forehead. "Night-night, Mama," Tails mumbled. A few hours later, Tails woke up screaming, waking Rosemary up. "Miles." She turned on the light and rushed over to Tails, who was crying vehemently. She picked him up and let him cry into her shoulder. "Did you have a bad dream, Miles?" Tails sniffled and nodded his head. I dreamed that you and Ebony got kidnapped by some scary things." "Shh, it's okay, sweetie. Nothing's gonna kidnap me or Ebony." She patted and rubbed his back. "You promise?" "I promise," she smiled. It took about half an hour for her to get Tails calmed down enough for her to rock him back to sleep. She tucked him back into bed, kissed his forehead, and crawled back into bed herself. 2 days later, Tails was playing in the living room, while his mother was on the phone. "Uh-huh. Okay, I'll give it a try. Thank you," she sighed, hanging up. "Miles, can you come here for a moment? Mommy has to talk with you for a bit." "Okay, Mommy." Tails crawled up to her. "What's wrong, Mommy?" "Miles, I've noticed that you haven't pooped for a few days. Is there something wrong that you aren't telling me?" Rosemary asked, crouching down. "Nuh-uh. I just don't need to go poopy." Do you think you can at least try? Please." "Okay, Mommy. I'll try." Tails got into a squatting position and pushed as much as he could before giving up. "Sorry, Mommy." "That's okay, sweetie. At least you tried." She patted his head. "Looks like we might have to do this the hard way." "What do you mean, the hard way?" Tails asked. "Well, sweetie, you're obviously plugged up down there. That's the reason your tummy hasn't been feeling too well, and why you haven't pooped recently. So, we've got to get it out of you before you hurt yourself." "Oh, that doesn't sound like fun." Tails shivered. "I know it doesn't, but it's for your own good." She grabbed a bottle of pills and took one out. "Do I got to take that pill?" Tails whimpered. "Well, sort of. I don't know if you remember, but I had to do this once when you were 3, she said, stripping him down to his diaper. "After that, you wouldn't let me go near you and kept running away from me for a whole week." "I think I sort of remember," Tails said as she picked him up. "I know it didn't feel very good." Rosemary carried him into her room, pulled one of the sides of the crib down, and laid him there. "Now, I know this will hurt a bit, but please just bear through the pain, Miles." "Okay, Mommy," Tails said, sucking on his pacifier. Rosemary untaped his diaper and took a deep breath. "I'm sorry, sweetie." She wanted to make the process as quick and painless as possible, so she quickly inserted the pill and withdrew her hand. Tails closed his eyes and clenched his teeth. It felt like someone had taken a hot poker and jammed it up his rear end. Halfway through the process, he started wailing from the pain. Rosemary quickly taped his diaper back up and cradled him in her arms. She sat down in the rocking chair and tried to calm him down. "It's okay, sweetie. It's okay. It's all over now." She patted and rubbed his back, holding him close to her chest. "I'm sorry if it hurt, Miles. Mommy's really sorry." Tails' crying started to subside as he heard something coming from his mother. Her heartbeat. He pressed his ear up to her chest and started sucking his thumb as his crying diminished to sniffling and the occasional hiccup. "You okay now, sweetie?" Tails nodded slowly without looking at her. "Do you want to lie down for a while?" Rosemary asked, standing up. Tails looked up at her and nodded again. "Okay, sweetie." She set him in the crib and left the room. A few minutes later, she came back with Tails' favorite plushie and pacifier and gave them to him. "I'll check up on you in an hour. It shouldn't take too long for the pill to take effect." "'Kay," Tails mumbled as Rosemary shut the light off. Rosemary sighed and sat on the couch. "I hope he won't be mad at me." Tails hugged his plushie and rubbed his bottom. He knew his mom did that because she didn't want him to get hurt. But why did it have to hurt so much? His stomach didn't feel any better either, but he had a feeling he'd have a really messy diaper once the pill took effect. It's not like he had any control over going to the bathroom anyways, so he figured it wouldn't come as a surprise later on. He closed his eyes and sucked on his pacifier before falling asleep. About an hour later, Tails woke up to a pretty bad stomach cramp. He doubled over holding his gut, wincing in pain. "Mommy." Rosemary rushed into the room and saw Tails clenching his stomach. "Miles, what's wrong? Does your tummy hurt again?" "Uh-huh. It hurts a lot worse than before, though," Tails cried. I think the pill has started to work." She put her hand on his stomach. "Yup, it should be coming out any minute now." "Make it go faster, Mommy," Tails whimpered. "I'm sorry, sweetie, but I can't." She rubbed Tails' head. "But you might want a position so the crib doesn't look like the inside of your diaper." "Okay." Tails winced and got into a squatting position. Without warning, he started filling the back of his diaper. It took a few minutes before he finished, and as he stood up, he lost his balance and landed right on the seat of his messy diaper. Feeling the mess spread around even more caused him to start crying again. Rosemary laid him down and cleaned him up as best as she could with the baby wipes and stuck the pacifier back in his mouth. "I think somebody needs a bath after such a messy diaper." Tails smiled when he heard the word bath. After Tails was clean and his fur was dry, Rosemary changed him into a fresh diaper and set him on the floor in the living room. "Oh, before I forget, somebody special is coming over tomorrow, Miles. Can you guess who it is?" Is it Sonic?" Tails asked. Nope, not Sonic. Guess again." She smiled. "It's someone equally as important to both of us." Tails thought about it for a moment, and his eyes lit up when he realized who she was talking about. "Is it Daddy?" "That's right, Miles. Daddy should be home sometime tomorrow morning. Yay, Daddy's coming home. Daddy's coming home. Tails cheered, flying around in circles, and eventually landed in Rosemary's lap. Easy there, Miles, she laughed. Don't get too excited. Why shouldn't I be? Tails asked while his tail still swished around excitedly. You do realize you'll have to tell him about everything in the morning, don't you? Oh yeah, I almost forgot about that. Tails said, a little crestfallen. But I can show him my picture when he gets here. And I'm sure he'll love it. But you should probably tell him first. She bounced him off her knee. If you want, I can help you tell Daddy. Really? How'd you help, though? I'll be there for support while you tell him. I doubt you'll need me, but I'm sure your father will understand either way. She smiled. Then we can be one big happy family, right? We already were, sweetie. Tails giggled and hugged her. I love you, Mommy. Rosemary smiled and hugged him. I love you too, Miles. By the time 8 o'clock rolled around, Tails was already fast asleep in Rosemary's lap after being fed a bottle of warm formula. Rosemary got him dressed for bed, tucked him in, and kissed his forehead. She cleaned up a few dishes, and then got herself ready for bed. She slowly slipped into bed, careful not to wake up Tails, and turned out the lights. Morning came around sooner than Rosemary expected, and she woke up to Tails sitting next to her. Wake up, Mommy. Daddy's coming home. Tails bounced on her bed. Well, good morning to you too, baby. Did you sleep well? She picked him up. Tails giggled. Uh-huh. I slept really good. I'm happy to hear that, she said, getting out of bed. Let's get you cleaned up and ready for Daddy. After a quick diaper change and some breakfast, Rosemary changed Tails into his onesie and overalls outfit and clipped his pacifier to the onesie. Thank you, Mommy. Tails smiled. You're welcome, Miles. Now, why don't you go get your drawing? I'm sure Daddy will be home any minute now, Rosemary said, straightening his shoulder straps. Okay. Tails wadded off to his room and returned a few minutes later, drawing in hand. Is Daddy home yet? Not yet, Miles. Be patient. But I don't want to be patient. I want Daddy. Tails crossed his arms. Rosemary laughed. He'll be home shortly, don't worry. After another 5 minutes, a yellow taxi rolled up, and Amadeus stepped out, grabbing a suitcase. Thank you ever so much for the ride, Amadeus thanked the taxi driver. It was my pleasure. What are the odds that I drove both you and your wife home, eh? The driver laughed. Pretty great considering it actually happened. Anyway, you have a nice day, Amadeus waved. You too, the driver called and started driving off. Rose, Miles, I'm home, Amadeus called as he closed the door to the house and set down his suitcase. Daddy, Tails exclaimed, wrapping his arms around Amadeus's waist. Hey there, Miles, Amadeus said, taking notice of what Tails was wearing. You're looking different. Honey, Rosemary walked up to him. Miles here has something he wants to tell you. Tails stood back and cleared his throat. He looked back at Rosemary, who simply smiled and nodded at him. Okay. You see, I kinda like wearing diapers and being treated like a baby. I see. He looked up at Rosemary. And he's already told you. Yes, honey. He told me a few days ago when I came home. This was the surprise I told you about over the phone, she explained. Amadeus closed his eyes and crossed his arms, thinking. You're not mad at me, are you, Daddy? Tails asked, pulling his pant leg. Mad? Of course I'm not mad, Amadeus said, picking Tails up. If anything, I'm happy. Happy? What for? Rosemary asked. Think about it, Rose. We've been talking about having another baby for months now, so this is perfect, Amadeus said, holding Tails in front of him. So, you're perfectly fine with Miles acting like a baby. I don't see any harm in letting him do so. I'm sure he'd want us to play along anyway. Amadeus grinned. Well, that's a relief, Rosemary laughed. Oh, why don't you show Daddy what you made, Miles? Oh yeah. Tails jumped down and grabbed the picture. He opened it up and showed it to Amadeus. Is that all of us? Amadeus asked as Rosemary stood next to him. Uh-huh. It's you, me, and Mommy as one big happy family. Tails smiled. Do you like it? Like it. I love it, Miles, Amadeus said, picking him up into a hug. But not as much as I love you. I love you too, Daddy. Tails smiled as all three of them hugged. Thank you for joining me, Morgan Freeman, for the conclusion to Tales Back in Diapers. And in this nearly 2-year-long journey to complete this story, I'm glad that you stuck with me through the entire thing. Until next time, this has been Morgan Freeman, thanking you one last time for joining me for Tales Back in Diapers by Black Nightwing. We already were, sweetie. Tails gigged and hugged her. Oh, son of a bitch. Gigged? Fuck is... How do you gig?